Britain's new prime minister is now in office. Liz Truss accepted the Queen's invitation to form a new government. The 47-year-old is the fourth prime minister in a little over 6 years. The Conservative leader takes over after Boris Johnson resigned due to a series of scandals. Truss faces an uncertain economy, but says she has a plan.
I will get Britain working again. I have a bold plan to grow the economy through tax cuts and reform. I will cut taxes to reward hard work and boost business-led growth and investment. I will drive reform in my mission to get the United Kingdom working, building and growing.
For more, I'm joined by John Quelch. He's the dean of Miami Herbert Business School at the University of Miami. He's also an expert on international business trade and global economic issues. John, inflation is hovering at about a 40-year high in the UK. What do you make of the new prime minister's plan? Is tax cuts the solution to that inflation problem?
John, good evening. Very controversial, I think, to suggest that tax cuts are going to save the British economy at the moment, particularly in the face of dire energy shortages this coming winter. There's tremendous pressure for relief packages to be put in place that will cushion energy price hikes in the UK. It's hard to see how tax cuts in the short term can not result in deficit spending in the face of the obvious need for welfare support for older and poorer British citizens who are facing an energy crunch.
Part of that energy crunch, or a policy measure meant to combat it, is that Truss is expected to cap energy bills. So how does that play into then the deficit spending you were just talking about as a result of tax cuts? And how do you think, I mean, obviously all of Europe is facing an energy crisis. How do you think that cap will play out, and will it be effective?
The concept here is that the Prime Minister and her government will legislate to essentially underwrite through loans the profits foregone by the energy companies that comply with the price caps that will be put in place. But ultimately, those represent subsidies, if not direct to the consumer, subsidies to the companies that are going to be eating the cost of the subsidy that is going to the consumer. So I think it can be effective in helping the folks who are most vulnerable to the energy price hikes, but it's nevertheless deficit spending.
So the U.S. and the UK share a special relationship, and also the new prime minister is trying to essentially solve some of the problems that U.S. policymakers are trying to solve with energy prices and with inflation. Explain and help people understand why the relationship is so important between the American government and the UK at this moment in the global order.
The term special relationship is a term that's used more often in the UK than in the US. And particularly after the UK left the European Union, the value of the UK as a communications bridge between the US and the European Union in Brussels has diminished. However, the UK stands firm with the US in taking a tough stand on China, in taking a tough stand on Russia, in supporting strongly Ukraine, and in all matters related to defense, national security, military collaboration. The UK, as the leader of the British Commonwealth, which of course includes the important nations of Australia, New Zealand, and India when it comes to countering China in the Asian region, the UK stands firmly with the US, and that is not going to change with the new prime minister.
How should we think about the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, and her predecessor, Boris Johnson? Quite a singular figure, but they are of the same party. So how should we think about how similar or different she may be from Boris Johnson?
So Mr. Johnson was obviously a very colorful and entertaining figure with perhaps some big vision ideas, but very little appetite for detail and the heavy lifting of, legislative negotiation, etc. Liz Truss, on the other hand, I think is not exactly a colorful person, but she has already made a very important mark today because her 3 top cabinet appointments, none of them are white men. They are women and sons and daughters of immigrants. So this already is making a mark on British policy and politics in a way that we haven't seen before, right from day one. So I expect her to be a very significant and formidable figure. Whether or not she rises to the stature of Margaret Thatcher remains to be seen. But that is certainly someone who she sets as a bit of a role model and also as a benchmark against which she will be measured and will measure herself.
All right, John Quelch, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, John.